Cinema Classics is sponsored by the Gateway Film Center and is produced by John DeSando and Johnny DiLoretto. Listen to shows online at WCBE.org. I'm John DeSando.
I'm Johnny DiLoretto. This is Cinema Classics.
It is.
And boy, do we have a classic to talk about.
Oh my gosh. You know, I had seen Close Encounters of a Third Kind, of course, decades ago. I was so impressed with it. But in this week, looking at it again, I'm more impressed. And with everything that we've had, including Star Wars, since then, I'm impressed. What is it?
Yeah, it is a phenomenal movie. One is that it's very little about science fiction.
Good.
You know, it's mostly about how this one thing that's happening, right? This sort of slow kind of acclimation to extraterrestrials making contact with us, how it affects these people. In some ways, the movie is epic. You know, we're all over the globe here.
Oh, yes.
In some ways, there's this epic scope, but what really makes the movie sing is Spielberg drilling down to this one character, Roy, played by Richard Dreyfuss, at the height of his powers, who has been exposed to the aliens. He's seen the spaceships, right? And now he's obsessed with. Well, there's something with him and a couple of the other characters that haven't come into contact with the spacecraft and seeing the lights and whatever. There's something being imparted to them that they can't explain, right?
Yep.
And so he starts to obsess about what this is. And he looks into the palm full of shaving cream that he's holding, and he sees something in there. He looks at the mound of mashed potatoes on the plate and sees something in it. And this is no surprise to anybody, but what's happening is somehow the aliens have communicated that they want to meet a certain group of people.
Elected believers.
At Devil's Tower.
At Devil's Tower.
Right.
And I told you that I was so drawn to this movie that a few years later, as I was riding across the country on my motorcycle, I went to Devil's Tower, which is nowhere in Wyoming, but somewhere. Because as you approach the tower with almost the same point of view that Spielberg gives it, it slowly emerges, this gigantic formation. And I have to say that when I got up to it, people were spelunking all over the place, up and down it. But it transfixed me in some of the way that the Dreyfuss character, Roy, was transfixed by it.
I got a theory.
Yes.
Because I was watching this, probably the first time I've seen it in over 15 years for sure. I had this theory that one, you know, I read this Richard Schickel retrospective of Spielberg's works, and one of the things that Spielberg has talked about a lot is this this theme of communication that he has, you know, been obsessed with to one degree or another. It turns up in these movies, and this one clearly, probably the ultimate representation of that theme, right?
Yes.
How do we communicate with these aliens?
Similar to what they tried in Arrival.
Yes, but this is done so much more brilliantly and cinematically, right? This tone, the music that they use, they communicate through music.
Yes.
And I get the goosebumps when I think about that mothership blasting out the tones, and it's like, you know, the light is kind of lighting up. Anyway, I want to posit to you that this is really about the love of cinema.
Listen, you talk to somebody else because I'm already he has Francois Truffaut as the head phenomenologist.
Right.
What do you say?
So it all culminates with Francois Truffaut.
Yes.
One of the founders of the New Wave.
Yes.
Right? Which influenced these guys like Spielberg. Spielberg wouldn't have a career if he wasn't influenced by guys like Truffaut. That's one part of it. The other part is early on, Dreyfuss wants to convince his kids, hey, let's go see Pinocchio, or let's go play golf, mini golf. And he doesn't. He's like, listen, here's the deal. Pinocchio, you're gonna love it. It's gonna transport you. It's gonna do this, or you can have fun and we can do this golf thing. They all scream golf. right? At some point, when the spaceships are coming down and they're going to get the little boy, Barry, you remember?
Yes, I do.
And he's Melinda Dillon is
Yeah.
shutting down everything,
Yeah.
right? The vacuum cleaner that goes crazy is chasing them through the living room. As it passes the television, which is all snowy, as it passes,
Good one.
a Western comes on the
Oh,
screen.
very good.
And now, let's talk about Devil's Tower again. The locale for none other than John Ford's My Darling Clementine.
Oh, good.
There's something about
Oh, yeah?
So what my theory is here, that Spielberg lays the groundwork for this idea that this is really about cinema,
Right.
And what happens when these people look up? They see lights. They see these lights.
Yes.
The interplay of light, the interplay of sound. And what connects it all? Music. And it all ends where? On a giant sound stage.
Now look at, and I'm going to add to that in a less cinematic way. But I'm going to suggest to you that in your cinema motif, that there's a bit of Hitchcock in this.
Okay?
And first of all, in Dreyfus, the guy nobody believes,
Right.
So the Jimmy Stewart type,
The everyman guy.
right? The everyman guy. And secondly, the traipsing up Devil's Tower,
Yeah.
very similar to North by Northwest.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's great.
So, I mean, look at Spielberg's a genius. He's
Yeah.
got all of this going on in his head.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here, how many years later, and I'm thinking, holy cats, I think the guy was... Why wasn't he influenced by Hitchcock?
Yeah, no, of course. That just kept coming through to me louder and more clearly than it ever has before, is that this is really about the love of cinema. And when you love cinema and it transforms you, like this experience has transformed the Dreyfus character, you need to surround yourself with those people,
Yep.
right? And now I know Spielberg has complained that if he were to make this film today, he would not make the Dreyfus character leave his family.
Well, I know, that's a tough part.
I watched it through that lens of his comment, and I gotta say he made the right choice, because metaphorically, thematically in this film,
Yes.
he can't. Those people don't accept him. They don't accept this love.
Yes.
It goes back to them rejecting Pinocchio.
Yeah.
And interesting, the Melinda Dillon character. This
Yes.
was a brilliant move. Most people would cast someone that didn't look like Terry Garr. Terry Garr and Melinda Dillon look very similar in
Yes.
this movie. Melinda Dillon is the female figure that accepts this,
Yes. Oh,
that understands it profoundly.
I love how he dumps Terry Garr
He's
in
just
the middle of the movie.
She dumps him. She takes the kids,
know.
loads them into the
But I
station
mean,
wagon. That's the
Spielberg-
last you see of
Spielberg
Right.
dumps her.
But it's great
Yes.
because you don't see them anymore.
And you're right, because Dillon takes right over. And she's a much more sympathetic. Garr is cute. Dillon is not cute. She's just a lovely older woman.
Right.
But the difference between the feeling
Yeah.
that Dreyfus has, I agree with you. And also, I would have to say, although I object to his leaving his family,
They
as you
leave
point
him,
out,
though.
they already left him. They already left him, and in our motif, particularly, we recently talked about Slow West and about the Western motif. The idea of going west,
Yeah.
you're leaving an awful lot behind you,
Right.
and you're facing a great deal of danger.
Right.
But there is something in people like Dreyfus and Spielberg who are ready to take the plunge into new.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that you can watch this movie that's fascinating about it, is the portrayal of domesticity. So one of the things I always love about these older movies, especially the films of the 70s, is that emotions were messy. Family was messy. There wasn't an outlet for every little sort of, let's have our family talk, or let's go to the family is messy. And one glimpse of the home life of these people, there's clutter everywhere.
Yeah.
There's, when you first meet the family, one of the kids, he's like a 6-year-old, he's standing in a playpen, and he's bashing a doll against the rim of the playpen. And it's just this constant noise and this bickering. And even though there's love there's a lot of messiness and there's a lot of disruption. I'll tell you what, there was this scene in the middle of the film where Dreyfus, he's going nuts. because he can't figure it out, and he's locked himself in the bathroom, and he's in the shower, and Terry Garr is demanding that he opens the door, but he won't. She breaks in, and she sees him just in the shower, totally clothed, with the water pouring down on him, and he's crying, and he can't understand why. And the kid comes in, his oldest kid, sees the kid, and he sees his dad, and the kid is suddenly struck by shame, that his dad is losing his mind, that he's emotional. He starts calling him a crybaby. And that leads, it's a whole sequence that leads him ultimately to Terry Garr taking the kids and leaving
Yes.
him.
Yeah.
And again, it's just, you talk about going west, you talk about the power center. What else is west?
Right.
As far west as you can get is Hollywood. Right?
Yes.
And that's where all of it happens. So there's this great kind of commentary on dreams, on someone having a dream, someone valuing something that their loved ones don't, and how that's a deal breaker.
Yeah. Well, I think Kubrick envied, with his 2001 envied Spielberg's take on Close Encounters, and probably because there's so much heart in Close Encounters, and 2001 does not have it. It's sterile. It's epic, as you would say,
right?
But it's sterile. The other thing is that, in thinking about Jaws, and one of the things that you and I have talked about is the pace in which he gets to the big deal.
Right.
And how brilliantly he's able to take that. In this film, I'm excited about the slow, I know what the big point's going to be. I realize it's going to be there, but I'm very happy to be taking that along there.
It is, and the ending, the whole third act, or the final, the finale of the film, is about 30 minutes long, and there's a lot of silence. You get the lights and the noise from the spaceships, but it's also a lot about watching people kind of think through this.
Yes.
The excitement of it, the wonder of it, the fear of it, and it all works out for the best. But is it, and that's another thing we have to talk about, is that prior to this period, this is 1978, Close Encounters comes out. Prior to this, science fiction was, you can go all the way back to Voyage to the Moon, and if you do go back to Voyage to the Moon, most movies about encountering extraterrestrial life, it's a threat.
Oh yeah.
It's something scary about it.
Oh yeah.
It's unpleasant.
Yeah.
The 50s. You grew up with all those 50s sci-fi movies. It's more often than not something to be terrified of.
Yeah.
Spielberg had this radical idea that this was going to be a beautiful meeting of minds and cultures.
Yeah.
And that comes through resoundingly clear still today.
And my favorite back in those days was Forbidden Planet. And the opposite of what you were talking about, but the same idea, but completely different. That is, it moves towards something that's really pretty horrible, is the monster is in your mind. And Spielberg moves towards something that is really glorious.
Yeah.
And so there's the difference, but they still, the good job is taking you along, knowing that you're going to be getting a big reveal.
Right.
But being happy to be taken along, and that's what I love about this movie. And when you consider the digital age in which we live, some of that stuff that Spielberg pulls off is pretty and visually impressive.
I think one of the most powerful images, the very first alien that steps foot off the portal opens up a little bit.
Yes.
And you see this impossibly long-limbed creature, right, bending down. And then when it stands up and outstretches its arms, and it's backlit, it is one of the most beautiful images in science fiction that I've ever seen.
Do you think he should have had him meeting and greeting aliens? In other words, do you think he should have depicted aliens or left it to our imagination?
I loved it.
Did you like it?
I did. I love the way they look, the movements of them. This again is.
I mean, it's the big-headed.
This is. I know, but listen, you get. First of all, it's minimal.
Yes.
But the movements of them are so gorgeous. Now, I think in reality, Spielberg had little kindergartners dressed in these
Yes.
costumes. But that childlike movement comes through, and it works.
Yes.
And they swarm around Dreyfus,
Yeah.
you know. And then at the end, you get the one, like there's an interaction, an exchange with presumably the leader, right? And it's beautiful. The puppetry or whatever they're doing there is really great, and you don't get too much.
No, I confess that I'm a minimalist about this stuff, and I would just be happy to leave it to my imagination. But in this case, he does such a fine job, and it fits so well with the humanistic theme of this film. And everything is so gracious, and it allows you to accept Dreyfus leaving his family. He does everything right. And another point you're reminding me, in these times...
Look, back then, a lot of guys left their families for a whole lot less.
No, I know you... Here's what I'm thinking about today.
Yeah.
When you go over Devil's Tower and you see that whole complex waiting for the spaceship and then seeing him, there's an order which you hinted about, an order there, a success, and everybody doing his own part to it, and the leadership, such as Truffaut, is inspired by. It reminds me how everything isn't happening that way with our pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
That our leadership has failed us in many respects about this. In that film, I realize that they've cordoned it off. They've even put sleeping gas up there so people can't get on there.
Where they want to convince people that there's some sort of toxic poison in the air.
Yeah,
Been some spill to keep people away.
So I get it. This is pretty tender stuff that's going on here, and they don't need schmucks, whom we all know pretty well, to be interfering. So anyway, but you're reminding me that I was thinking today, if you want an idea of where humanity really comes off well, where leadership is what it should be, here's the movie.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And there's another, I know we're going on, maybe put it up in two parts. But there's a thing, reading about Spielberg's career and how he ingratiated himself with Universal Studios. He took a tour.
Yes.
And then he just stayed.
He stayed.
He stayed. And then when he told one of the heads of the studio what he had done, they were so impressed with his chutzpah that they gave him a pass. And he's never left Universal Studios. There's a line that Truffaut utters to some of the military brass here. When the pilgrimage has arrived, and they're trying to get rid of these people. And they're like, why are these people all here? The military said, why are these people here? And Truffaut says, they've been driven, they've been invited.
Yes.
They have been invited.
Yes.
And then he says something, they deserve to be here more than we do. And there's something about that, like about a young man with Spielberg's talent, breaking onto the lot of Universal Studios and ultimately bringing us some of the greatest films in American cinematic history. He deserved to be there more than a lot of those people.
And think about it. When he did this film, 29 years old.
Wow. It's amazing.
Close Encounters.
You need to revisit it.
Of the third kind. Have your own third visitation.
Interestingly enough, there are 3 versions of this movie.
Right.
You gotta watch out which one you're
Right,
getting.
yeah, you do.
Yeah.
The director's cut is probably the one we're talking about.
I don't know which one I saw.
I don't know. I think it,
It's interesting. There was the original theatrical cut, which is like is like 135 minutes long. Then there was the special edition cut, which was actually shorter but had more scenes in it.
Yeah.
And then the director's cut, which I think was 2 minutes longer.
Right.
Either way, I don't think you can go wrong any version that you're going to get in this movie.